I asked ChatGPT to give me a list of the 10 most unreliable cars on Australian roads. Since all 3 of my cars are so reliable, never break down, and are just the best in general, I wanted to humor myself and ask ChatGPT to give me a list of the most unreliable cars on Australian roads. And this is what it gave me. 10 cars. Some completely unsurprising, with even the most smooth-brained individuals being able to understand why those cars ended up on that list. When I first saw the list, I was very surprised to see some of the cars on there, but I guess you can't argue with the facts. My challenge today is to walk around this massive auction yard in an attempt to spot every single unreliable car, starting from least unreliable to most unreliable. ChatGPT was not wrong. Cars that I thought would be impossible to find just kept multiplying the more I explored. They were like dead flies on your grandma's windowsill. So without further ado, let's get into it. So number 10 on the list is actually a car I didn't expect to see there, but now that ChatGPT has mentioned it, it kind of makes sense, and that is the Mazda CX-5. And you might be thinking, well, these are super popular, everyone has one, but the diesel ones are the ones that have the problems. Apparently, they have issues with cracked cylinder heads, overheating, injectors, the usual diesel stuff, EGRs as well. So there's a few here, but none of the ones that I've found so far have been diesel ones. So is this a diesel? So usually it'll say either Skyactiv G or Skyactiv D or something like that. But for some reason, there are a lot of petrol ones. Maybe the earlier ones don't say diesel on them, so let's check under the bonnet of this one. Oh, is it? It's got a turbo. That's definitely a diesel. Wait, do you guys see that? No, look a bit closer. 81% of you guys that watched the last video weren't subscribed. So why don't you just go ahead and quickly click that subscribe button if you wouldn't mind. Be greatly appreciated. Well, look at that. Corner right there. Perfect. So it turns out the earlier ones don't say diesel or anything. So to unsuspecting people, they just look at it and go, oh, it's probably the petrol. It's probably reliable, but no. So these ones have issues with their EGRs, their turbos, and cracked cylinder heads, which chances are this one is here for at least one of those issues amongst the other 15 that Yorick and I have spotted here. I really did not expect to see a Mazda CX-5 on this list. Those issues also affect Mazda 6s or anything really with that Skyactiv G engine. I actually like CX-5s. Amongst the sea of these new Chinese crap MGs, BYDs, Xiaofeng or whatever they are, I would rather own a diesel one of these than like a brand new one of those, just so I don't have to be seen driving one of them, because I really don't like it. I know a few people that have CX-5s, and it mustn't be a coincidence that they all have petrol ones, because obviously the diesels, according to ChatGPT, have these problems. But occasionally I do see TikTok videos popping up about these cars with like the problems I just mentioned, cracked cylinder heads, injectors, DPFs, EGRs. So it does make sense now. It makes a lot of sense as to why there are so many here, as I just said before. The petrol models of these cars, very decent, and I would recommend anyone to buy one. But turns out, not a diesel though. All right, the next car on the list is right up my alley, considering, I talk about this in every single video. I used to work at Audi and I came across these issues a lot, and that is the DSG issues. So that's the dual clutches, mainly the cars that were equipped with the DQ200 dry clutch gearboxes, so the 7-speed DSGs. And this is exactly what this Polo over here is equipped with. There's a few different variants of DQs. There's the DQ200, which is the entry-level one. That's a 7-speed dry clutch. These ones have issues with squeaky clutches, shuddering clutches. They wear out very easily and they're very expensive to repair. There was also a recall a few years ago for the accumulators on these. So the accumulator is a part of the mechatronics unit, and that is what's responsible for switching gears. And what they would do is they would lose pressure and they would even lock up on some people. There was a very famous class action lawsuit against the VW Audi group where a woman was driving on the freeway, it locked up, and unfortunately she lost her life. So these are very notorious. I tell people to stay away from them as much as possible, but let me show you guys what I'm talking about. And conveniently, it's also right behind this CX-5 that we were talking about just before. So under here, just underneath the battery, that is a DQ200 DSG. And if you have a look here, see that little hump there? That little hump is a provision for the accumulator that sits in there. and that's what fails. Another thing is, what I mean by dry clutch is that it's literally a manual transmission with 2 clutches, and it has a normal bell housing like a regular manual transmission vehicle, and in turn the clutches wear out just like every other car. But the problem is that because it's a dual clutch, there's twice as many, and it's about 10 times as complicated as a normal manual. So ChatGPT didn't specify which generation of Mini Cooper had problems, but this is the only Mini Cooper in this entire yard. So I'm just gonna talk about this one. So what ChatGPT said is that they have electrical problems. And another thing I know from personal experience, my cousin had one very briefly, and the keynote very briefly, where the thermostat sat on the head, the coolant literally eroded the part of the head away. The only way to fix it is that you had to weld the head, and it's very expensive. People without car knowledge don't really understand what goes into something like that, and so most of the time they're not willing to pay to get that sort of crap repaired. See that? High performance vehicle. Apparently these have a lot of electrical problems, which I do believe, because these cars, not only European, but they originate from the UK, and you can't get past the fact that these have British heritage. You can definitely tell that this is a BMW Mini Cooper because you've got these connectors on the coil packs, which literally every single BMW has from like E46 onwards. And as you can see here, that little coolant problem I was talking about earlier, there is remnants of coolant. As you can see, all pink under there. I would never own a Mini Cooper. I hear that they're great driving cars, like very good, but I feel like you can get much better cars that are more reliable, that offer the same driving feel without having to pay the price of ownership. Like, for example, a VW GTI, like something along those lines. All right, so Cherokee and I walked around the entire lot and we couldn't find a Fiat 500. There was a Fiat 500 a couple of days ago when I filmed the last video, that 595 Abarth Maserati edition, but that's since gone. Who knows where that's gone now. But there is, over this fence, which we can't cross, a Fiat 500X. And what that basically is the same as a Fiat 500, but it's on stilts. And they have the same issues, engine problems, gearbox problems, especially build quality problems. Back when I briefly worked at Alfa Romeo, Fiat, Jeep, it was a whole big dealership. I was in charge of coordinating car deliveries. And the main problem that I had from customers is the fact that the cars took way too long, and when they eventually ended up in their hands, they were not satisfied with the build quality, because Stellantis group, which is Fiat, Ram, whatever, they're not super renowned for reliability, build quality, longevity. So Fiat 500s are definitely on this list. I'm not surprised that they're on this list. All right. Next one on the list, of course, there's got to be a Land Rover or a Range Rover somewhere in this video. What this is a Land Rover Disco or Discovery. I could be here all day talking about all the problems that these cars have, but most notably electrical problems, air suspension problems, engine problems, and just overall owner dissatisfaction according to ChatGPT. A good friend of mine, Ollie, his dad had one since brand new. The biggest problem I have with these cars is that from factory, they have 30,000 kilometer service intervals, either 25 or 30,000. That is absurd, especially in today's day and age when everyone is using 0W whatever oil. That is just way too thin, especially for one of these. If it's like an old Land Cruiser or an old Toyota Camry, okay, you could probably stretch it to 30,000 Ks. Not that you ever should, but for these, 100% you shouldn't. So because of that, and because of the fact that most of these are diesel, the diesel would sludge up the oil with carbon deposits. It would start blocking up oil galleries. It's a British car where they drive on the right, but the bonnet latch is on the left. Makes sense of that. Oh, beautiful. So this over here, V6 turbo diesel, which is a crap engine. They're good when they work, but because of it's Land Rover's own fault, it's a prehistoric engine. It's even got a clutch fan. I mean, this car is probably from the mid-2010s and it's still got a clutch fan. Usually you see that type of stuff on like industrial cars, on commercial vehicles, utes. Even nowadays, they're starting to drop that all for E-fans. The timing chain is on the back of the engine, which means you need to drop the gearbox to get it out. Or because this is a body on frame car, you lift the whole body off the frame, and you work around it like that, which is just absurd. Ollie used to tell me stories about how his dad's car used to consume a lot of oil. It had electrical problems. The air suspension went out each corner, one at a time, and that's probably like $2,000 a pop. Avoid these Land Rovers, man. Fifth on the list, which I was kind of surprised to see, although the issues with these cars are very known, I was surprised to see in the top 10, and that is a N80 Toyota Hilux or a 150 Prado like that one over there. Anything that's really equipped with a 1GD or the smaller 2.4 litre diesel, because they have issues with EGRs and especially DPFs, and in turn causing turbo failures and just general other surrounding the motor. So let's pop the bonnet on this X-Mind 2.8. So there was actually a class action launched against Toyota between the years 2015 and 2018 for these DPF issues, and unsurprisingly they ended up losing, and they had to replace basically all affected vehicles. They had to replace all their DPFs, which would have costed an absolute fortune. Essentially, the issues they were having is they were prematurely blocking up and disintegrating, and in turn causing other problems to the vehicles. These 1GDs aren't bad engines just by themselves, but unfortunately, due to very strict emission laws, they're choked by these emissions control units like DPFs and EGRs, like I just said. So since that lawsuit, Toyota now offers a 10-year warranty for DPFs. And if you know anything about how expensive DPFs are, that is really, really good, because they're absurdly expensive to replace. If it was me, I'd cut a hole in the top of one, gut it out, delete the EGR, get it tuned, and never have to worry about that crap ever again. People that drive long distance a lot in these diesels don't really have those issues as much, because the DPF is mainly used for around town when you're not sitting at a constant speed. So it's just pumping soot into the DPF, not getting hot enough to burn it off, and then also pumping soot into the intake manifold. So those are the main problems with these 1GDs and later model 1KD engines. All right, number 4 on this list, Ford Focus or Ford Fiesta. I can't seem to find any Ford Fiestas here. These, if you don't already know, have issues with their power shift gearboxes, or as they're commonly named, the power shit gearbox. So these have similar issues to those Volkswagen DSGs, although probably a little bit worse, I'd say. These gearboxes also had mechatronics issues, they had clutch issues, and they also had issues with locking up, losing gears, stuff like that. Just the usual crap dry clutch stuff. This finishes off our Bermuda Triangle here. We've got the diesel CX-5, the DSG Polo, and the power shit Ford Focus. Let's have a look under the bonnet. I have driven a Ford Fiesta that had a power shift gearbox. Horrible, horrible gearbox. They don't know what they're doing. They're very sluggish. And honestly, they should have just put a normal torque converter in, but Ford decided to be all fancy and put a bloody power shit in. Duratec 2-litre motor. So yeah, 2-litre, 4-cylinder petrol. There was a class action for these as well. I'm not overly educated about them like I am with those ones. All I know is that from my experience driving a Fiesta with one, they are garbage. One of the worst gearboxes, even worse than an AU BTR or a Commodore 4L60E.
And that, of course, is the Holden Cruze. So if you know anything about these two cars, they're both made by Daewoo. Well, they both were, because they don't make them anymore. South Korea, probably North Korea, because it's fucking shit. As far as I know, there's no problems with the seats or anything, because the seat has no moving parts, therefore it can't really break. Yeah, oh, this one's a manual. Look at the gear knob on it though. Looks like this one.
This owner was half smart.
Yeah, so this person avoided the automatic gearbox issues in this thing. They've only got the manual gearbox issues. It looks like they've taken a bite of the gear knob. I don't even know what fucking engines these have. Is this a diesel as well? Never, you know what they say, never late in a 1.8, and this is, whoa! Now from what I've heard, this is the more reliable of the Cruze Captiva bundle because it's got less parts on it, no turbo that I can see. Yeah, no turbo, it's not diesel. No common rail issues. It's also got a manual gearbox, which means it won't blow up. Probably a lie, but anyway. This one's a manual, which usually is more reliable than automatics because you don't have to service them as often. There's less moving parts, but yeah, either way, these cars are horrendous. If you own one, sorry to hear. There's a reason that auction yards all over the country are just filled with these things because no one can get rid of them. The fucking greatest car the world has ever seen. Come over here. The diesel Captiva. Look at that. Wow. LX. What does that stand for?
Luxury excrement.
No, lots of expensive repairs. You should know this, Nathan. Look at the boot, 7-seater. It's a bit, you know, odd because if you have a Captiva, you wouldn't have 7 friends to fit in the car. But come around here, these things are notorious. This is obviously on this list because it's the worst car ever made in the history of the universe. But as you can see, what a machine. So as you can see, real replica leather on the seats. It's all cracked up and fucked. Yeah, anyway, that's enough about the inside. I like to spend as much time on the outside of these as I can because each minute you sit on the inside, you just feel your soul fucking soak into it. These things just take your soul. They're soulless. How the fuck do you open this thing? Oh, here you go. Beautiful. Holy moly. Oh. Turbo diesel, as you can see. Sorry to hear. It's got oil all over the timing case because, you know, if the oil's not coming out of the exhaust, it's coming out of the head or somewhere else it's not supposed to. It smells like raw fuel because the fuel system's probably eroded. These things are just shit. If you disagree with me, you're just wrong. Let's go through the problems. I've heard that the turbos explode on these. I've heard that the fuel systems break. The engines overheat, catch on fire, transmissions are shit, electrical problems. I say about the Captivas, everything that can go wrong will go wrong and does go wrong. This is why auction yards are always filled with them. There's what, we've counted 5 here today, I think. We went to Grays last week and there was 14 of them. You wouldn't understand. What's that Kirsten song? You don't know what it's like to be so fucked up that you hate your life. The rusty windscreen, this is my favourite. Whatever that is has gone rusty and just leaked fucking cyanide off the bottom. Yeah, got the fucking.
This is the #1 crowned most unreliable vehicle according to ChatGPT, the Jeep Grand Cherokee. A round of applause. Another Stellantis product, same company as Fiat, Chrysler, Alfa Romeo. The Jeep Grand Cherokee suffers from mainly electrical problems. Apparently their body control modules can cause issues that makes the car go haywire. It makes the car stall. The transmission doesn't work properly. I also don't think these early model Grand Cherokees look very nice. When they do work, they're great cars. They're very comfortable, they have enough power. I wouldn't say that they're the best off-road considering they're a unibody chassis and they're independent front and rear. You hear of horror stories when you look up these cars on the internet, people saying that they have coolant leaks, oil leaks, suspension problems, bushings wearing out prematurely and stuff like that, which I'm not really surprised, especially with the coolant leaks and electrical problems. But these 3.6 litre Pentastar V6s, definitely not the best V6 engine. But this one is actually a diesel, and there was a very well-known news report done on a Jeep customer that bought one brand new and he was struggling against Stellantis to get the car lemon lawed because he had so many issues with this 3-litre turbo diesel engine. These are a V6. Apparently he had issues with DPFs, EGRs, very, very common problem with modern 4-wheel drives and just regular diesel powered vehicles. I have heard of some blowing head gaskets as well. Fuck. Another problem that I have heard of is their oil coolers leaking and also mixing oil and coolant. So just riddled with problems, but it's almost like the American Captiva, but I don't want to go that far. I would still much rather own one of these than a Captiva.